Some of you may have already heard this story, and I've posted something about it at our website, newsradio1310.com. It's about license plates. And do you need two or do you need just one on your car or your truck? 934, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX at newsradio1310.com. We're at 35. Because where I used to live, I lived in Delaware for 7 years. We were not required to have a front license plate. And because of that, there's nothing to hold it on the front end of my Jeep. So I had an option when I had to put the front plate on when I came here. Mechanic said, I'll drill some holes in your bumper and we'll attach it. And I thought, uh, so I've been planning on buying one of these kits you put on. I saw one online and I keep forgetting to go back and do it. It looks like a C-clamp and it goes around the bumper and you put the license plate there. So right now it's simply cobbled on. It doesn't look very nice, but it meets the requirements of the law until every once in a while I actually hit like a snowdrift and then it detaches on one side and dangles there and I've got to go hang it back. And I admit, I could be a little bit better about taking care of that. Except I've been planning on selling that vehicle anyway, and I don't want to drill holes all over it for that very reason. Let the person who buys it from me go ahead and drill the holes. But I saw this story on the AP Wire this morning. This is just a brief paragraph from what's called the News Minute. Legislation that would eliminate the use of front-facing license plates on registered vehicles in Idaho is headed to the House floor. The Idaho Statesman reports that the House Transportation and Defense Committee narrowly approved the measure on Monday, despite opposition from current and former police officers. Now, police officers say this will make our jobs more difficult and maybe more dangerous. All right, I want to do everything I can to help keep law enforcement safe, but of all my friends who ever went into law enforcement, working either as police officers or deputies, none of them ever went into the work because they thought it was a safe line. Well, gee, I think I'll do that because there's not going to be much in the way of a danger in that job. In fact, a lot of them actually went into this line of work because they liked the adventure. I had a friend, he was working for a county sheriff's department, and he got a job at a big city police department, and I saw his dad one day. His dad was our assistant county prosecutor. And I asked how he was doing. He says, he's going to switch because he's finding road patrol of the sheriff's department too dull, and he thinks he needs more adventure. Although he eventually went back to work as a sheriff's deputy after working a couple of years in city policing. But the point of the matter is here, they didn't get into this line of work because they expected it was always going to be safe. And I'd like to help them out. But when you're pursuing someone, you're normally pursuing them from behind, right? So number one, you can see the plate on the rear of the vehicle. Or number two, if you're just driving down the road behind someone, you can see it. Now, I assume the reason that there's a demand for one on the front of the vehicle is because more and more states have adopted these optical scanners. So if you pass someone going the other way, the scanner reads the plate and then it comes back if there's an outstanding warrant, or it comes back indeed if the car is stolen. And those things are all important. We acknowledge that. But if you really wanted a crime-free world, why not just put everybody in chains and leave them in their homes? And then you could hire people to come around and feed them 3 times a day and, wipe their bottoms and do those. You wouldn't have any crime because people wouldn't be able to go anywhere. And this is supposedly a free country still, and I bring this up. So why is it necessary to have that on the front? Because as I said, I lived in Delaware before I came here, and we only had a rear plate. First of all, the state saved on some sheet metal costs, I guess. And number two, I don't know that there was any more serious crime going on because of a lack of a front plate. So I'm asking for a comparison here. Which one of these is better, worse? I don't know the answer to that. I don't have the stats in front of me. But I'd like to believe that just because you don't have a front plate on. And the other day I was driving to work. Friday morning, I guess it was. And I was following a pickup truck and nobody had brushed it off. And so the back window was still covered in snow, and as well as the back bumper. You couldn't see the plate anyway. And to me, that would be even more important than being able to look at a front plate on somebody's vehicle. And just a couple of thoughts on that I wanted to share this morning, because sometimes I think that we have gotten to the point where we overregulate. And I thought when I moved to Idaho, I'm coming from a liberal East Coast state, and I'm coming here, and I thought for sure that here things would be, but it's not all that much different in the way it's governed. And yet the reputation of the place is that we have a lot more in the way of just general liberty. Is it a liberty issue? I think so. Again, I mean, how much identification do you need? Do you need to, do you need to have like in the old days when I remember being a little boy and my dad he always had a pickup truck around the house. But back in those days, you always had to have all the load numbers and everything else on the side. That eventually went out the door as well. But maybe we should put our biographies on the sides and back and the roofs of our cars, and that way, and if you actually are licensed to carry firearms, or if you're carrying a firearm, or you have approval to carry a firearm, maybe if you've had a criminal record or you ever were arrested for jaywalking, maybe that should be printed on the side too. All of those things would make somebody's job easier. But the question is, are they all necessary? 20 minutes away from 10 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. We're at 34 on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Before Steve Millington left today, he was telling me, he said people are asking him, because he gets to see me on a weekly basis. People will say, did Bill really lose all that weight, down 60 pounds over the last 4 months? Steve will say, well, I don't actually go with him when he steps on the scales, but I can see it in his face. I mentioned that because I wanted to pass along the good news about the Total Body Transformation System, of which I have been a participant. And the average participant will drop 22 pounds in 60 days and lose 4 inches off a waist. It was a system developed by a company that's been in business for 21 years with an A-plus rating from the Better Business Bureau. And I've been telling people it's not a fad type of diet. It is actually highly recommended by a lot of scientists and doctors who've looked into it. And it's fairly simple to do. As I say, I'm not the most disciplined guy in the world, but I've been able to do it. And I wanted to point out, too, as well, the cost of it is about the same as buying the groceries that you're replacing. I'll be honest, I drink shakes. Sometimes I throw a banana in them, or half a banana, or a handful of blueberries. Delicious. And it keeps and I'm not hungry. I don't walk around hungry. In fact, the meal replacement is often healthier than what you've already been eating. You still, though, can get a healthy amount of calories. And we wanted to point out clinical results on this are published in some of the leading medical journals and scientific journals all over the world. It's an all-natural diet, scientifically validated ingredients. They result in appetite control, increased metabolic fat burning, and a healthy natural boost of energy. And the Total Body Transformation System is backed up with a full money-back guarantee. If you'd like to know more, call Don Chandler, Marketing Executive Don Chandler, locally at 208-731-3560. That number once more for Don Chandler, 731-3560. We have a caller with us, and I just want to pass along the telephone number 736-0300. And caller, you're on KLIX.
Hey, good morning, Bill. I wasn't certain if your commentary on dual license plates in Idaho was on the level, or if you were just pulling our legs. You're very good at that occasionally. However, I get the opinion that you really do believe what you're saying. I didn't hear a really good reason from you for not having a front license plate in Idaho.
Before I pointed out, though, well, hold on. I pointed out I lived for 7 years in a state where we don't have them. Well, we didn't have them, and I don't notice there was never any reports of any uptick in crime from a lack of a front license plate.
Yeah, well, I'm only 68, and I did live away from this state for a while, but I grew up here, and before the middle 60s, before I could drive, my parents used front license plates as a great way to distract us during long vacations. We played a game identifying the state. So there's one reason to have them. Secondly...
Wow, that makes all the sense in the world, so we can play games on the highway?
Bill, when we start talking about spending legislators' time in this state to discuss such a silly thing, I mean, I have been registering vehicles in Idaho for years, and it has never troubled me. In fact, I have never really thought too much about it, except that I do see the benefit. You talked about a couple of law benefits as far as identifying vehicles as they approach from the front. I I'm not. I don't care really about your concerned about whether or not you have to put one on your Jeep. I am more concerned though about spending taxpayers' money discussing something that has been going on in this state for years. When I went in the Army, I never once thought about fighting to defend Idaho's right to have two license plates on vehicles. I never thought about it once. So I don't see this as a rights issue. I see it as a tax waste issue because the legislators' time is being taken up to discuss such a
Well,
silly thing.
wait a second. If we're talking about taxes, how many vehicles do you suppose are actually licensed, registered, and on the road in the state of
I
Idaho?
have no idea. Tell me.
Maybe a few 100,000. Let's just pick a number out, right? A few 100,000, right? So let's just we'll just come up with a number and say it's 300,000. It's probably more than that. So then there are 600,000 license plates that are stamped and cut and all of that. So if you cut that in half, what do you save? How much taxpayers? If you want to just talk about it in dollars and cents, if you're producing 300,000 versus 600,000 from all that sheet metal you buy, and metal costs are expensive now. We've seen that's why people are ripping off lines, metals, copper, everything else they can get their hands on from farms and the like. So let's just say the state cut that budget in half. How much money would they save taxpayers?
Again, I've never worried about it because I don't know about it now, but I know in the old days
But
those were
again,
made by
I brought it. No, no, no.
those
What
were
you're not
made
worried
by
about? You
prisoners.
brought up
I
taxpayer
got it.
dollars.
They were made by prisoners, and anything to keep state of Idaho prisoners busy was again fine with me.
Well, you could have them do macrame or something like that if you want to keep them busy. But the
Yeah,
fact
but
of the matter, state still has
I
to
can
buy the metal.
tell. I can tell you haven't been to craft shows lately. Macrame sales are way down.
Wow, this
But
is
I
this is so bizarre. Thank you for the call, though. I mean, just I brought it up from a safety perspective. Does it actually increase safety? I brought that up. And if you want to increase safety, then put big numbers down the sides of your vehicle, on the top of your vehicle, and we can do it that way too as well. It, but to argue here and say, well, they're wasting our taxpayers' dollars by wasting time on this issue. Well, wait a minute. If it comes down to just saving money on the metal you use, then let them talk about it. At least bring that subject up. We have another caller with us. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air on KLIX. Go ahead.
Hey, Bill, great show as always. I kind of agree with you. I don't see the point. And regarding that previous caller, I could really care less if his kids or his grandkids are able to identify the states with license plates. That's what school's for. Why should taxpayers have to foot the bill so he can teach his kids which states or what? And that's the same mentality we that's gotten us into problem. That's the way we've always done it. Well, maybe the way we've always done it is stupid and need to look at it. And by the way, isn't that what legislators get elected to, is to go out there and discuss these things?
And I didn't even endorse one way or the other. I raised the question and said, I don't know. I came from a state where they don't have front plates. I came here, they've got two. The other two states I've lived in, Vermont and New York, always had two, but I never saw any figures one way or another to show that a second plate actually cuts down on the dangers for law enforcement or cuts down on crime. I don't know that any exist. I'm sure that somebody has done research on this, though, or we wouldn't even be bringing it up.
Exactly. I agree with you. I think it's a valid thing to raise. Why don't we look at that?
But if it is keeping people safer, well, let's take this, extrapolate. What else could we do that would keep, and as I pointed out, we could Velcro or chain people in their homes, and then they would never be able to go out, rob a bank, or get in a car accident, or do any of those things. Why don't we do it? Well, it's highly inefficient to lock everybody up if you want to keep the economy going.
I just coming back from Sun Valley, and I'm going through Jerome. I've seen two city snow plows going down Lincoln, and neither one of them are cleaning them roads, and the roads are a mess. How about looking at public safety, removing the snow?
Yeah. Oh, thank you much for the telephone call. We're 10 minutes away from 10 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX News Radio. Yesterday, I was at a box store, one very big one, founded by a guy named Sam. And I was there, and I noticed somebody parked next to me had on a Montana plate on the back of the car. I didn't look around front, but it's blue. And it's white lettering on blue in the outline of the state. But I've also seen some Montana plates. We have these specialty plates now, and those are different. They have a different color. There was a time when I could recognize license plates on my own just from traveling with a family. I don't know that we played the game, but I could recognize them. We used to get them for our bicycles. You'd get them in your sugar pops or whatever in the little they'd come as prizes. And there was a time when the 50 states only each had one plate, and then they decided they could make more money with specialty plates. So you can get ducks on them, or fish on them, or a picture of the Capitol building, the dome. Uh, I think that's more confusing for police officers than a second plate or lack of a second plate. Driving down the road, and it used to be you could identify Montana because it was dark blue with white lettering, and now you got a dozen choices because of all the different options. And the reason government does that, offering those options, is because it was originally seen as a way to boost revenue. I don't think that's worked as well, though. You're up next. You're on the air on KLIX at 9:52.
Yeah, as long as we're talking about license plates, why did they stop using the raised number plates? In a fire, you could always tell what those license numbers were. Nowadays, you can't tell if it gets in a fire. There's just two blank pieces of metal.
Because it's easier for these electronic scanners to read the current plates, which helps them identify if the car was stolen or if there's a warrant out for the registered driver's arrest or anything like that, which again gets us back to the point, just how much do we want to surveil people? I mean, is it necessary to constantly surveil people in order to keep you got to balance between a free society and public safety. Thank you for the call, and you're up next. You're on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com.
Yeah, you mentioned about saving money on the plates that we didn't have to, if the state didn't have to pay for a front plate. Well, I just renewed my plates and registration at the end of January, and I had to get a new metal plate, two of them. And they had to be brand new because it was 7 years since the last time I got them. And they charge you $6. So I don't know if the state's paying for it or if the person who owns the vehicle is buying the plate, registering the vehicle is paying for it, or both. So it's $6 for a new plate.
And again, that $6 obviously goes into a fund somewhere. Thank you. We can debate the merits of that. Government needs some money to operate. Obviously, you do have to pay for somebody to fill potholes and plow roads and patrol roads. All of those things are important, obviously. But when I was a kid growing up back home, we would you'd get the same plate. You'd have to wait a few weeks for it to get shipped when you needed them replaced because you always got the same number. I don't know if states still do that. You're up next. You're on the air on KLIX. Go ahead.
You keep touching on why they want the front plate, and it's just follow the money. You keep saying, they want to catch people so they can fine them and put them in jail and make money that way. That's why they want the front plate, is so they can catch more people and make more money.
Well, and that's true. I mean, we have over-criminalized a great deal of the country any longer. There's that old line that, you get up in the morning, and by the time you go off to work and come back 8 hours later, that you probably violated about 50 laws you didn't even know existed. You're up next. You're on the air on KLIX.
Two things on the license plates that I've recognized. If you're pulling a trailer, they can't see the back one. And I drive to Oregon 5 days a week, and they profile those license plates for the dog sniffers to come in. And very seldom do I see an Idaho license plate pulled over just east of Ontario. But there's always, every day, there's 3 or 4 state policemen watching those cars that come through. So they're watching for the marijuana that comes through.
Yeah, they're looking for New Mexico or Arizona or Colorado, likely in that situation. Thanks for the call, and you're up next. You're on the air.
Hey, I just thought you did a pretty good job taking everybody off of the immigration policies and all the other Trump crap going on. I appreciate that. I don't care one way or the other about the license plate, as long as I can get down the road and I can be safe. I see your point. I see their point. So I'll just get along, man. Come on. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you much for the telephone call. I've got time for at least one more caller. We're coming up on 9:56. It's 35 on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. And you're on the air.
Yeah, Bill, I have a better example of bias confirmation than his, because he's working for the state, obviously. and his confirmation is obvious. How about Jesus is our example? We should follow his footsteps. Show me his driver's license.
Yeah, thank you for the call. There's an old a friend of mine once gave me back in the 1970s. People may remember Ronald Reagan did a daily radio commentary. I mean, he recorded in a span of a few years, like 11 or 1,200 of those. And Reagan was explaining, he was giving a speech to college students about what the real meaning of liberty was. And liberty is, see, people think that tyranny is a guy hanging, in a dungeon somewhere, but tyranny can be soft, and it's not always meant to be tyranny. But liberty simply means choice. And Reagan told the story about when he learned to drive back in the 1920s. And he said, well, you didn't need a license, and you didn't need license plates, and you didn't need insurance. Now, truly, when we got more highways and we got more automobiles, you do need some rules. Just like in radio, you can't have 5 million watts on the air because you compete with a guy in another city. You have to have some way to, a traffic program that keeps things clear. And, you need traffic signals and the like, or stop signs. Uh, Although during a big blackout on the East Coast a number of years ago, it was pointed out by one of the newspapers that people coming up to traffic lights that were out were literally stopping and using it as a four-way, and they were organizing themselves. But Reagan's point was, you learned to drive when your dad thought you were old enough and mature enough, and then he taught you how to drive. And then, if you wanted to borrow the car, he let you borrow it when he thought you were mature enough or old enough. And his point was that there was a time, when we didn't have to walk around being licensed or surveilled or do all of those things. And as we got more complex, obviously a lot more complex over the last 100 years, you saw a lot more regulation come in. The question is some of it necessary? Probably the answer is yes. Is all of it necessary? We've got to start thinking about those things, because you're only going to end up more and more and more regulated if you don't revisit these things every now and then. Tomorrow, we're going to be joined in studio by one of the medical pros from Tripp Family Medicine. On Thursday, we've got a discussion coming up with the city of Twin Falls about the removal of some trees. I won't tell you where yet, but that's on the way in the next couple of days. God willing, if the creek don't rise, they'll allow me to come back and do this all over again tomorrow morning between 8 and 10 o'clock right here on KLIX.